Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Griffith?
Present.
Mr. Haas?
Here.
House?
Here.
Ms. McDermott?
Present.
Mr. Perry?
Here.
Ms. Radel?
Here.
Ms. Sedman?
Here.
Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee? Mr. Urban?
Here.
Mr. Vogt?
Here.
Mr. Schnee?
Present.
Mr. McKinley?
Present. Thank
All
you.
present?
We don't have any recognitions or proclamations this evening. Additions or deletions from the voting session agenda. Mr. Pedri requested that we remove number 8 and 9 from the agenda. If no one has any objections, they will be removed.
I would just like to know why they were removed.
Well, I would have to ask Mr. Pedri. I got the same email I think everybody got.
After review, I have some budgetary concerns.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to adopt the voting session agenda.
I have a deletion, Mr. McGinley.
Go ahead, Mr.
The deletion is the item for the community development. I'd like to have that taken off the agenda because it was not properly introduced. The other ordinances were. That one I would like to have taken off because we did make a motion to introduce the other ones, but we did not on that one. So I would like that one removed. And I would also like to have the executive session placed at the end of the work session as opposed to in the middle of the work session. And
we're only talking about the voting session agenda right now, Mr. Griffith.
well, that's part of the agenda, right? It's at the bottom.
No, it's after the agenda for the voting session.
So how do we get it? How do we figure out what
We'll
to do with
talk
the
about
executive
it
session?
after the voting session's over, Mr. Griffith.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So that would be number 4 you're talking about from the agenda, Mr. Griffith?
Yes, number 4.
How many people would like to remove number 4 from the agenda?
I would. I agree with Mr. Griffith that it wasn't properly introduced. There should have been 4 votes for that. The only ordinances that are automatically introduced are the ones the manager is required to submit. He's not required to submit amendments. Council does amendments, and so we needed to introduce that.
Mr. DeLuca or Ms. Kokomo?
Actually, I was able to get the transcript from the hearing, and what I will read to you is the discussion that took place after the issue of the community development ordinance was raised. Mr. Urban, and then the other point of order for the attorneys, since this is a budget ordinance, this should be automatically just forwarded to us without floor votes, correct? Mr. Chair, you are right. A budget ordinance is introduced by administration by the manager, yes. Mr. Urban, okay, so it's auto-introduced. Mr. Chair, yep. Mr. Urban, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chair, anything else? Bearing in mind the ordinance has been introduced by manager's office, so we will have a public hearing next time, and we'll be up for a final vote. Mr. Urban, one other thing. Did we not have a motion and a second on that? It would need for it to be withdrawn. Mr. Chair, Ms. Kokomo-Revito, should we withdraw the motion and second? Ms. Kokomo was automatically introduced. The motion, Mr. Urban, I know, and the transcript, the audio was kind of blurry. I couldn't make that out. They should be withdrawn. Should we withdraw? Mr. Perry, should we withdraw your second? Yes. Mr. Perry, sure, yes. Mr. Chair, Ms. Radel, withdraw your motion, please. Ms. Radel, yeah, withdrawn. There was no objection raised by any of the council members at that time. Mr. Griffith's email correctly uses cite section 211B which states proposed ordinances dealing with the annual budgets, long-range operational, fiscal, and capital plan, administrative code, accountability, conduct, and ethics code, personnel code, and any other matter the county manager is required by the charter to submit to county council in the form of proposed ordinance shall be considered automatically introduced and shall not require 4 affirmative votes. The ordinance introduced at the February 9th meeting deal with the annual budgets. Section 407B, which is also cited by Mr. Griffith, deals with the introduction of ordinances. However, the reliance on Section 407B for the proposition that the county manager cannot automatically introduce these budget amendments fails. Section 211B is specific, whereas Section 4.07 is general. And there's a general principle of statutory interpretation, which very briefly states specific statutory language ordinarily trumps general language. Therefore, the language of 211B controls as it specifically addresses the matter at hand, while 407B does not. And then finally, Mr. Griffith does cite Section 510F. 510F deals with the adoption of amendments to any of the budgets. And to be clear about this distinction, Section 510F does not deal with the introduction of the budget amendments. It speaks to the adoption of the budget amendments. So ultimately, regardless of how any of these ordinances were introduced, the ordinance amending any budget, council must approve any amendment to the budget. And to that end, Section 520F is clear that county council shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposed amendment. And based on that analysis, the office law recommends that the public hearing was warranted and the ordinance and the amendments were properly introduced. And I will follow that up in writing, Mr. Griffith. I just did not have time today to do that.
Okay. Anyone else besides Mr. Griffith and Ms. Houck who would want to remove that?
Well, I will go on the record as disagreeing with that statement. I think that the council has the right to introduce ordinances to amend the budget. The manager does not have that ability in our charter. The manager has the ability to introduce automatically ordinances to deal with the budget, position budget, any other budget, but he does not have the power to introduce an ordinance for the amending of a council budget. So I will go on record as stating that.
Okay.
I
We
agree
have a
with
motion then to adopt the agenda with the deletion of number 8 and number 9.
Presented, Schnee.
Mr. Sneed, do we have a second for Mr. Sneed?
Second,
take a-
Kendra.
Did we take a vote on the deletion of the item, Mr. McGinley?
No, we didn't, because all of you and Ms. Houck indicated that you did not want it on, so that no one else spoke.
So is that the
They
new
were
policy
asked
that we only
directly if they
take?
could.
Is that the new policy that we only take a roll call vote when it's necessary, or do we do that all the time? Because we've been doing it all the time.
We could do it anytime, Mr. Griffith, but it was only you and Ms. Houck, so that's 2 people versus the other 9 people, right?
Well, I'd like to be on record for those other 9, please.
I think you are on record very strongly about your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Thank you. Motion to suspend the bylaws regarding the requirement a majority of those participating in the meeting must be physically present at the meeting. Ms. Houck, do you make that motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second for Ms. Houck?
Second,
Sheila.
Schnee.
Second for Mr. Snee. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Do we have a motion to suspend the bylaws regarding the conduct of public meetings to the extent that the current format is inconsistent with the term of the state's emergency declaration? Do we have a motion?
So moved. Leanne.
Ms. McDermott, do we have a second for Ms. McDermott?
Second, Perry.
Second, Sheila.
Oh, Mr. Perry has a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition?
Yes, Walter?
Mr. Griffith? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We're now at public comment on the agenda items, please. Members of the public who would like to speak in regards to the agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Rabo speaking.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to item number 4 for the community development for the rental assistance, I would also like to add if Mr. Riley could explain the criteria as far as applying for the assistance to the member to the public, and also in terms of the notice once once it goes through, once the monies are received, and also if the city residents of the 4 cities in our county can apply. That's the questions that I have for the community development. And for agenda items number 10, 11, and 12, I would like to add, because I didn't add it in the public comment during the hearing for the administrative code, I find it very disconcerting that when somebody is appointed to a board, that if they are involved in I thought, Mr. Chairman, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or members of the solicitor's office or office of law can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that there was something passed probably a few years ago by council with regards to if persons serving on nonprofit boards have to disclose that they serve on those nonprofit boards to the ABC committee or to council prior to them being appointed, or or nominated or appointed to the board, to the respective board. If that could be clarified for me, because I think that is on the books. And I think that needs to be observed, because prior to being appointed, a member of the elections board was serving on a nonprofit board and did not resign from that board that had to do with elections, influencing elections. So I think moving forward, Mr. Chairman and members of council, I think that needs to be observed, that persons serving on nonprofit boards that have to do with influencing elections should have to disclose and be to the ABC committee or to council. Thank you.
Other members of the public?
Mr. Manta?
Go ahead, Ms. Manta.
Yes. Also, when I was listening to I think it was Mr. Perry had the committee for the appointments for the ABC. In his statement that he stated, he said that if they feel that there's something wrong going on at the appointed place that they're appointed, they have an obligation to tell the county council or tell what's going on. And I believe with the Luzerne County Transportation Organization down there, they didn't tell anybody of the anomaly of someone paying for their life insurance. So I think that should be a closer looked at from the ABC committees. And then I'll sit back and listen to what everybody has to say. Thank you.
Other members of the public?
Well, you know what? I did forget one thing, and I didn't see it on the agenda. Is that taxpayers thing, or the tax collector still on the agenda?
Oh, it is not, Mr. Manta.
Okay. Thank you.
Other members of the public, please.
Brian Dwyer from Larksville.
Mr. Dwyer?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I'm not clearly understanding the issue at hand that Mr. Rabo and Mr. Mann commented on. Is it that one of the ABCs, the members of the board, are getting life insurance policies paid for by an outside source? Am I understanding that correct?
Mr. Dwyer, I don't know if you've been following some of the media in this regards. This became an issue in regards to the Luzerne County Transportation Authority. They have passed a resolution or something at the board level where term life insurance was provided to the board members. That goes all the way back to probably maybe even the beginnings of the Transportation Authority. That's what they're commenting about.
Thank you. I have been listening, but it's for some reason I'm confused on the issue, and I apologize.
Oh, no, I thought maybe if the papers have reported some things too, so I thought maybe you saw something.
Well, again, yes, I've heard different things, so that's part of the confusion. I'm just trying to make sure I have the issue correctly, and to be quite honest, I don't think that I do, but my public stance, my opinion would be that if that's not something sanctioned by county council as a whole for all the ABCs, then no, I don't think it should be allowed for any ABC. And that would be my position. Thank you.
Okay. Other members of the public? Other members of the public? Okay, if we turn then to the first item, which is the minutes of the February 9th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'm trying to make public comment.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
The system was blocked. It wouldn't unmute. But
yeah, so it's sort of cutting out or something when you're trying to speak. Is this Mr. Shiner? I'm not sure. I can't.
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you better now. Go ahead, Mr. Shiner.
Okay, good. The ordinance amending the administrative code is very necessary. The charter itself stipulates and puts forth the non-benefit, non-compensation for all the different agencies in the county under the charter. Also, the accountability, conduct, and ethics code is pretty concrete as to what can and cannot be done, what can be accepted. And it lists covered persons and says it means all employees of the county, all members and employees of county authorities, boards, and commissions. So while some other laws may allow for compensation to authorities or other boards, whatever they may be, I think we do have the ability here in Luzerne County to have that be a requirement. The person doesn't have to take the position if they don't want it. They don't even have to apply for it. But I think we have that ability to trim that down and say, we are not going to allow such outrageous benefits as this life insurance for the rest of your life, just because you seated on the Transportation Authority. Also, all of these authorities, boards, and commissions, back in 2012, were supposed to have come to council with anything that they did that was contrary to the current rules for the charter and the code. Obviously, LCTA didn't, and perhaps there's a few others. And so I would suggest that the Authorities, Boards, and Commission Committee start looking at some things, or we'll comment on at the end because they're not relative to this ordinance. But this ordinance needs to be put into the administrative code. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the public? I can hear somebody in the background with a conversation. If they would mute their mic if they're not speaking, we would appreciate that. Okay, we're moving over to the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 9th meeting?
So moved, Sheila.
Ms. Saban, do we have a second?
Second, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott? On the question?
On the question, Mr. McGinley, I take exception to the section in the minutes that is headed by the words ordinances that are automatically introduced. I would like to be on record that I do not believe that they could be automatically introduced because they were not required to be submitted by the manager.
Okay. Well,
that's all.
We'll put you on record for that, Ms. Houck. Anyone else? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition?
No.
Mr.
No.
Urban? And Mr. Griffith? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Moving down to agenda items. Motion to adopt an ordinance amending the capital plan budget for Luzerne County, and this was the one of the public hearings that we had a little earlier. Do we have a motion? This has been introduced. This would be the second and final vote in regards to this ordinance.
So
Do we
moved.
have a motion? Who's that? Kendra?
No, Leanne.
Leanne, sorry. Do we have a second for Ms. McDermott?
Second, Kendra.
Ms. Radel? On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Griffith,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott,
Yes.
Ms. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Radel,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Moving down to number 2, motion to adopt the ordinance amending the 2020 fiscal year budget for Luzerne County, putting money into our reserve, and this, again, is one of the public hearings that we had a little earlier. This would be the second reading, and this would be the final vote. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Linda.
So moved, Kendra.
Ms. Hauk, and second by Ms. Radel. On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Radel,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Mr. Griffith,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Motion to adopt the ordinance amending the 2020 fiscal year budget for Luzerne County. And again, this would be the money that would go back against the debt service. Again, it was one of the public hearings that we had a little earlier. This is the final reading, and this would be the final vote. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Walter.
Mr. Griffith. Do we have a second for Mr. Griffith?
Second, Linda.
Ms. Hauk? On the question? Roll
Yes.
call, please.
Yes. Yeah, wait, excuse me.
Excuse me, go ahead. I'm sorry. Question?
Yes, yes. This is the one to the debt service, correct?
Correct.
And I just wanted to hear Brian's view of this. Mr. Sweats' view.
Mr. Sweats?
Thank you, Council Chair McGinley and Chairwoman Seidman. We prepared this debt service at the request of Councilman Griffith. As I explained in the agenda submittal, not that it's not a noble idea, but we expended the money, and I think Mr. McGinley alluded to in the public hearing before. Council had a 2019, we had a 2019 PO for the voting machines. This money was received in 2020. It was 60% reimbursement. It was the federal and state reimbursement. We actually have the machines and paid for the machines. So basically at that point, there's an expense and we were reimbursed. There's no additional money to now pay on debt. I'm not against paying on debt. If we were paying on debt, the $750,000 estimate that I've been giving for 2020 would be short by that $2 million. So we'd be short in the 2020 audit. We'd actually be paying down debt, which would be great. And we don't get the benefit until 2030. So you see $65,000 every year from 2021 to 2029 and multi-million dollars saved in 2030. So that's why I prepared it, because council asked for it in conjunction with the Office of Law, but that's why I'm against it.
Mr. Sweats, so I read that about the fact that it's a noble idea, but it didn't seem to make fiscal sense. The idea of bringing down a debt is great, I think. I mean, I like to pay off things early. But if there's no advantage to it, is that what you're saying? There's really no advantage. And in 2030, we really have little debt left, correct?
Correct. The debt schedule goes down at a very steep decline from 2029 on. You're talking about something years in the future. So without getting too technical, just the normal time value of money. Money today is worth more than money in 2030. So again, it's not a bad idea, but we're not paying anything off. We'd be paying it down. And that's money that we're counting as 2020 revenue to offset the purchase of machines that was also made in 2020.
And it would affect the audit. It would affect the audit.
Correct. It wouldn't affect the opinion of the audit. That's obviously by the auditors, but it would make the revenue less for the audit in 2020. Right now, we have it recorded as revenue. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McGinley, it's Linda.
Go ahead, Ms. Howe.
So in 2019, I recall the meeting where we voted to take on the debt to purchase the machines, as well as the 911 equipment, and they were all, it was an important thing. And I remember that we were at LCC at the meeting, and I asked the question of what we would do when we got the reimbursement, and I was assured that the money would be placed on the debt to pay back what we were borrowing to get the machines. I voted yes for all of that, but I asked that question to be very clear about what we would do with the money when we got the reimbursement. And I was assured by everyone there that it would definitely go back onto that debt to get rid of the money that we fronted because we knew we were going to get reimbursed. So I think that's where it should go. I think it's the thing to do to keep the integrity of why we borrowed the money and what we do with the money that came back to us from it. And that was the promise that was made in 2019.
Anyone else?
Mr. McGinley, Walter?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
And I was at that meeting as well, and that's exactly what transpired at that meeting. As a member of the public, I sat at that meeting and listened to this county say that when they were going to borrow the money, they were going to pay it back when the state government gave us the money reimbursement back. That was what was stated at that meeting to myself. I think Mr. Shiner was there. There was a couple of people at that meeting that heard that statement given by this county to the residents of this county, saying that if we borrow the money, we will pay it down on the debt when we get reimbursed. I certainly understand what Mr. Sweats is saying about paying down the debt not making sense at the end of the year or end of 30/30 because yeah, you're paying down the debt, but you know what? I'm paying extra on my car right now to pay the principal down, so I'll get out from under that debt quicker. Instead of 7 years, I'll get out from under that debt in 6. If that logic applies, I guess I shouldn't apply extra to the principal of my loan for my car. Because the benefit of that is I'm still going to have the loan for 6 years. So what's the difference? I might as well keep the money in my pocket. At the end of the day, it's getting out of debt. That's the point. And the other point is that we were guaranteed by this county that when we got the money from the government, we would pay that debt down. And if you don't approve to pay that money down, then you have lied to the people of this county because that's on record. And I for one, don't appreciate the fact somebody's saying, well, hey, you know what? If you borrow $35 million and we're going to pay back $2 million, but you know what? When the money comes in, we might have some other place to put it. I don't understand how it affects the revenue when the money was obtained through the bond. It's a due to, due from. It should have no absolutely effect on the budget.
Can I respond, Mr. Chair, when council's done?
After council's finished, please. Anyone else on council?
Yeah, it's Sheila again. Walter.
Go ahead.
I think that sometimes paying down the debt, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know if this happens this time, can be a problem. Even though you're getting out from under the debt, it can be a problem if you could have made more money keeping it in your pocket on your own, either through interest or tax deduction or whatever. I don't know if any of that happens here, but it's not always the best situation to pay off the debt.
Boy, I hope there's a lot of people listening to this broadcast.
Okay.
Well, why, Walter?
Mr. McGinley?
What?
Wait, hold on 1 second. Who else was asking to speak there that hasn't had chance?
Mr. McGinley, this is Steve Urban.
Go ahead, Mr. Urban.
I think, quite honestly, when you're a public official like we are, and the county says one thing and then decides in the future to do another, it's going against the word, their word, to be able to trust them. It's all about principle of the matter, too. Understandably, if the money was fronted at one time, and the county says, oh, when we get the money, we're going to put it toward the debt, I mean, that's what it should be doing. Whether or not, and then come the future when that money comes back as a reimbursement and we receive that money, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, we can keep it in our budget, we can keep it in our pocket, it has more value to us right now and not pay toward the debt, then you've, in essence, lied to the public. And that is a travesty in itself. Part of our position is to hold ourselves to ethical standard and not lie to the public. That goes for management. That goes for public officials. People take a vote in the past based on what is said by management in good faith. And then all of a sudden, now in the future, once this money comes back, they have all these plans to spend it in some other way instead of what the intent was. You're sold on intent originally, and then all of a sudden now the intent is changing. And so people on council at the time in 2019 took a vote based on what was said by management at that time. And now all of a sudden they want to take the money and use it for whatever they want to use it for. And I don't believe that should be the case. That money should go back toward the debt service. If it was borrowed toward voting machines, you knew you were going to get reimbursed on voting machines. That money should go to pay toward the voting machines. That's what was said. That's what should be done. It's not put it somewhere else because we blew the budget up because we were incompetent. You don't want to lie to the public as a public official. And that, I have a real problem with that. When county management says they're going to do one thing, then when they get something in, they want to do something else. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. That's all I have to say.
Other members of the council who haven't had a chance to speak.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Harry?
Go ahead, Ms. Haas.
Yeah, look, great discussion. Everybody's right on target. I mean, Steve hit it right on the head. That's really what it comes down to. Well, Linda said at the beginning of the discussion, this is what council was told would happen. We got to make it happen. And with Mr. Swets, I'll agree with him too. Money 10 years from now is not going to be worth as much. And why is that? Simple economics. We have a runaway federal and state government blowing money, printing money out. We're going to add $1.9 trillion, it looks like, to our national debt. And you got to pay the piper. That translates into higher inflation. That's why money today is worth more than it's 10 years from now. We are seeing a total erosion of faith in government at all levels. We have an obligation here at the local level to at least do the job. We can't print money like they can in D.C. We can't just take out infinite bonds like they can in Harrisburg. What we've got to do is pay this back, do the right thing, and pay this back. I hear what Sheila's saying, too. We want to put money where it's going to pay us back the best. You want to pay down your credit cards before you pay down your auto loan. But in this case, this is what we spoke about 2 years ago, and this is what's got to happen. Thank you, sir.
Mr. McGinley, can I be heard?
Who is speaking, please?
Dave Pedri.
All right, any other members of council?
Well, I have something else to say before we're done, but I don't care who goes ahead of me. It's Linda.
Well, yeah, but if there's any other members of council, they'll get
right.
opportunity.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, and then
Just
you'll
saying,
have
don't forget
an
about me.
opportunity. I don't hear anybody, Ms. Hock, go ahead.
Okay, so the reason that it's not going to see fruition until 2030 is because the whole thing was packaged together with 911, and it was a whole restructuring at the time that added a couple of years onto the debt, but it was a bigger package. If this had been a freestanding loan to buy those election machines, there wouldn't even be a debate right now about what to do with that money. We would be putting it back against that principle. But because it was all packaged, we have a debt that goes out to 2030. And I understand it was for very good reasons, but it was packaged as a piece of a larger debt and a restructuring that took us out a little farther. And again, I just want to remind everyone that it was packaged so that all of that, you're not separating it out and saying, well, this piece of it was for elections now because it was part of a larger thing. But if it had been an isolated loan only for those election machines, I don't think there'd be a question in anybody's mind about what to do with this money. The fact that the larger piece of the debt was for something besides the election machines and it's taking us out to 2030, I don't think matters one bit in this case, because it should not be considered today as operating income. It should be considered as money that was given back to us to offset what we already paid.
Okay. Mr. Swets and then Mr. Pedri.
Mr. McGinley, it's Sheila. I just
Yes.
wanted to respond.
Ms. Saban, are you? Go ahead.
Yeah. You know, Walter, I am correct in certain things about when it's beneficial to you, but I do agree with Mr. Urban and Ms. Houck and you. If you look at it as the county council being honest, that's what they said they were going to do, therefore they're going to do, then I understand that. I just don't want you to think that I haven't thought about this and that there are times, Walter, when it's better not to pay down the debt. It's more advantageous to you. And so you can say you hope there's a lot of public listening to this, but the fact is I'm correct in that respect. And Mr. Urban, I don't believe any public officials should not tell the truth and that we depend on their honesty. So, you know, I just wanted to respond to that because I felt like I was being dishonest and not understanding the situation. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Swets, please.
I was just going to explain the $35 million borrowing quickly. So this was around Thanksgiving of 2019. County borrowed $35 million. $22.1 million of that was for the 911 machines. So that was the 911 upgrade. Had nothing to do with voting machines. $12.2 million was debt service refinancing. The only money in that whole package that was borrowed for voting machines was $1.4 million. And of that $1.4 million, county administration said $800,000, almost $200,000 per year, was for the maintenance package. I had sent this out probably about 2 months ago in one of my council letters in one of my previous reports. I believe that, you know, this a little bit over $2 million is well over we borrowed. So even if you're going to put the money on the debt, we only borrowed $1.4 million. So where are you getting this $2 million to pay for? So I just wanted to go back to the meeting. I do not remember exactly what was said, and I'll defer to the manager on that, but I just wanted to explain the borrowing, that only $1.4 million, and I understand I say only and it's not pennies, but of a $35 million borrowing was related to the voting machines.
Okay, Mr. Pedri? Mr.
Can't hear
Pedri?
him. He's on mute.
Mr. Pedri, you're on mute. Do you want
I just said some really intelligent things too, so I'm going to try. Okay. May I recommend that County Council tables this vote? I would like to go back to the minutes of that meeting and the recording of that meeting. There were a lot of things said tonight. You know, I don't recall the specifics of that meeting, but let's have a full and complete understanding as to what is really occurring here. People are saying that there were promises made. If there were promises made, then we should stand by those promises. So I want to go back over those minutes. I want to go back over the entire borrowing. I'll ask Budget and Finance for a review. This isn't a pressing need right now because obviously this will be there in 2 weeks. My recommendation is that County Council tables this. We'll do a full and complete analysis of that meeting, and maybe we come back here next week and say, hey, listen, County Administration said we should put that on the debt service, and our recommendation is to go on the debt service. If that's the case, then let's do it. Then just give us a chance to get everybody's ducks in a row and have everybody say what was actually said at that meeting, as opposed to people saying, I sort of remember what happened 2 years ago. That would be my recommendation.
Mr. McGinley?
1 second, please. I have a question here for Mr. DeLuca or Ms. Crocomo. I think we had discussion about tabling an ordinance at one point.
Can't happen.
Well, who spoke?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought it was muted. I'm sorry. It can't happen. It's Walter.
All right. I asked Ms. Crocomo or Mr. DeLuca, though. Do you remember that discussion and what was the outcome?
I don't actually. Let me just see what the.
Mr. DeLuca.
I just have to see what the time limit, because the only thing that would prevent it would be if there was a time limit from the time of the public hearing.
Well, no, we have to have public hearing 7 days after. We're okay with that.
After it's introduced, right?
Okay.
I don't think there's a problem with tabling the vote on the ordinance. The problem would be tabling an introduction.
Well, it's already introduced.
Right. But you can table the vote. You can postpone the vote to a time certain if you want to.
That was the discussion, I believe, Ms. Houcken. I don't remember the outcome.
There was a discussion. I just, I don't remember what specifically it said, but I'm pulling up
I just don't know what the prohibition would be on postponing a vote on the.
I think table. I thought maybe if we postpone it to the next council meeting, that might be more allowable.
I think for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. But sure, if you want to call it reschedule vote till the next meeting.
Yeah.
It's called motion to postpone.
Second. That's Mr. Griffith.
Would that be the absolute? That would be the right motion, right, Mr. DeLuca? A motion to postpone.
I don't see why it would be an issue to table or postpone, but I'm sure postponing is less. Would cause less problems. So yes.
Okay. So do we have a motion to postpone this?
Mr. McGinley, I want to respond first before we do the motion to postpone, please. And my only response is this thing's been going on since last August. Now it's up for a vote. Now we're going to postpone it. I mean, I understand, and I'm not trying to rush this thing through. I would rather postpone it, and I would rather go through the process to give the administration a chance to dissect the video or the audio or whatever we're going to do. The question that I have is, we got the money from the state. If we only paid $1.4 million, as Mr. Sweats just said, Mr. Sweats is the one that made the ordinance. Mr. Sweats in the Office of Law made the ordinance. Why didn't they send us an email and say we only paid $1.4 million? Now we have to postpone to move forward. I understand the logistics of it all. I'm just saying that this is like never ending now. We've been doing this since August. If that was in fact the case, we borrowed $1.4 million for election machines, then we should pay $1.4 million back. I don't have a problem with that. We didn't borrow that money from the bond to pay the machines. We only borrowed 1.4. I get it, but why do we have to go through this constantly with this? Well, geez, now we got to postpone because the administration isn't ready. So that's my comment. I will make a motion to postpone. I have no problem with it.
You're making the motion, Mr. Griffith?
Absolutely. I make a motion to postpone to the next
And we have a
meeting.
second from Mr. Sneed.
The motion is to postpone till the next meeting.
Yes, that's what I wrote down. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Everybody understand Mr. Griffith's motion, postpone to the next meeting? Second by Mr. Sneed. Roll call on that.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Stedman? Ms. Stedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
No.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
10-1.
Okay. So it's postponed, the vote is postponed to the next council meeting.
Mr.
Moving down
McGinley?
to- Yes.
Mr. McGinley, it's Sheila. I don't know if this is appropriate here, but similar to what Walter said, is if when we, you know, look at it and say we're going to put it back on the table, if in fact it is 1.4 million that we borrowed, can the ordinance be revised to just pay that amount of money back?
Ms. Seaman, we can amend an ordinance right up to the final vote. So if the number changes, that can be amended to reflect that.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Down to number 4, a motion to adopt the ordinance amending the 2021 fiscal year budget for Luzerne County. This is regards to the public hearing that we had with the community development funds for rental assistance. Do we have a motion?
So move, Sheila.
Ms. Seaman, do we have a second for Ms. Seaman?
Second, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott? On the question?
On the question, Mr. McGinley?
Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you. This department does not exist. Is this a new department that we created for this money? If Mr. Sweats could answer that.
Mr. Sweats, did you hear the question?
I did. So what is, let me pull up the agenda real quick. Give me 1 second. I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay. Yeah, because if you look in New World under the 560 fund, there is no department with that number.
That's correct. So it would be a new department underneath community development to leave it separate so it's not in with regular community development funds.
So the question I have in section 12 of our charter states that council is the only one that can create a department, or the manager has to send a letter to council saying he's creating a department. That did not happen. So are we creating a new department by budget and finance? Because that's not allowable according to our charter in section 12.
That was the intent, to create a new department. Again, it's not voted on yet. CARES we put in a separate fund, and obviously council voted on that fund at the time the ordinance was put together. The thought with this was to put in a separate department within community development, so it could be separate without making a new fund.
Right.
Yes, and I agree, it should be in a separate fund. I do agree it probably should be in its own department. I think in the expenditure side, it should also be in a separate fund, not a COVID-19 fund. It should be in a designated fund labeled accordingly, so we can make sure that the 9 point so much million is used exclusively for that, because that's what we're given to it for. But my underlying concern is that we are not permitted, the manager and the administration is not permitted to just create departments in the budget without council approval or council's knowledge. And that's what's happening here. And so I think we need to make a motion to postpone this as well.
I think we have a March 5th deadline on this. I think I read an email today on that.
Can I be heard on this, Mr. McGinley?
Yes, go ahead, Manager Pedri.
I don't understand how we're creating a department here. A department is a place where people work, like community development or area agency on the aging. We're creating a fund here under community development to specifically put this money in. Is there a different definition of department that I'm missing? Because my understanding of a department is a place where people work, like area agency on aging or elections or county manager's office or DA's office. I'm not doing that. I'm not funding this. I'm not making a department. What we're looking for is, my understanding is this, we're looking for a fund under community development. We're just looking for a separate line item to have a clear understanding as to the money that comes in and the money that comes out. We're not creating a new department. Is there another definition of department that I don't understand?
Well, the only thing that I'm looking at is in our New World system, the way it was designed and the way that we're explained to us in council is the first one is the fund, the second one's the division, the third one's the department, and the fourth one is the account. So if that is not an actual department, then it's a fund. So therefore, it doesn't need to be created. It can go into its own fund. It can go into community development, just create a new fund for it. You don't need to create a new department. You're creating a department for that money.
I agree. You don't make a department.
I'll do whatever you want to do, but we're not creating a department. We're just creating a new fund under community development. You can change it however you like to change it. And
Well,
I'm obviously
yeah.
asking Budget and Finance to review all these budget amendments for accuracy with regards to the New World stuff, because what happened a couple months ago when we got surprised. So we're going to review this again. So if you think that should be in a different fund as a non-department, I'm good with that. However you want to do it.
Well, and
The ordinance,
go ahead,
I'm
Mr.
looking at the
Secretary.
ordinance on page 20, and it's a development line item. It doesn't have the word department, so it's a line item. On page 20 of our agenda items,
Right.
revenues.
The line is identified by division and department. That's what all of those numbers with the dots.
Yeah, but
separated.
it's still a line item. It's not.
It's a line item in a
Mr.
specific
Pedri-
department in a
Okay,
specific
department.
division.
My thoughts on department would be a place where people are actively employed or actively located there.
Well, we have a reserve division, and there is money in the reserve division that's also identified with a similar line item. It's not a place where people work. They don't work in the reserve division.
Yeah, and I believe would be a line item also.
Yeah, and I don't have I have more of a concern about the ability for us to have a separate department. And I understand Mr. Pedri's point that we're not actually creating a physical department where people actually work. I understand that. But the confusion will be is when you're saying that that's a department, then people are going to look for that quote-unquote department. So I don't have a problem. I do have a problem with the expenditure side of that equation that doesn't actually identify that. It puts it down as COVID-19 money in the expenditure side, I believe. It says it's going to go into the COVID-19 fund. And I think that it should be labeled differently so people in future council members will know where that money actually went to. COVID-19 is a pretty broad statement, but this is pretty specific money that goes to a pretty specific purpose. So I think it should be a little bit more specific in our designation of where it's going to go, so people can keep track of it more clearly. That's my concern with the whole department, and all of that other thing.
We want to remove COVID-19 and make it what?
Well, I think we should make it what the title of the money is: Housing and Urban Development Funding.
That's
just
fine.
like we did in the one up above where it says Community Development line item 560. It says Housing and Urban Development shall be increased by. Make it the same thing.
So do we have a motion to change COVID-19 to the Housing Urban Development?
Mr. McGinley, I apologize. It's Andy Riley. I just need to clarify, this is not HUD money. This is money directly from the U.S. Department of the Treasury.
That's
so
correct.
I don't want you to make a motion to put it under HUD when it's not, the origin of the money is not from HUD.
And if I could, Mr. Riley.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Mr. Riley,
Sorry.
what should be the proper title then, or proper designation?
It could be under Emergency Rental Assistance Program.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would think too.
Emergency rental assistance?
Correct.
Okay. So
Thank
any
you.
place where we have COVID-19, we would have emergency rental assistance. Correct? Mr. Riley, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I appreciate that. That's exactly. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Riley.
Okay. Do we have a motion to make that correction to the ordinance?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Griffith, do we have a second for Mr. Griffith?
Second, Sheila.
Ms. Saban? Roll call on the amendment, replacing the word COVID-19 with emergency rental assistance in the ordinance. Ms. Lawrence, roll call.
The Emergency Rental Assistance Program.
Emergency rental assistance, period.
Okay. Mrs. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. House?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay. Going back to the motion to introduce or to adopt the ordinance, Ms. Saban and Ms. McDermott, are you okay with adding that to your motion and second?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're ready then for roll call? Ms. Lawrence?
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Stedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
I'm going to abstain. Mr. Chair, reason I have a tenant who may apply for this program.
Thank you.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
10 yes, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Moving down to number 5. This would be introduction of an ordinance. Motion to introduce the ordinance adopting the Luzerne County zoning ordinance of 2021 and the Luzerne County zoning map of 2021.
So moved, Linda.
Ms. Hauk, do we have a second for Ms. Hauk?
Second.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second, Ms. McDermott. On the question, and Mr. Jones, I see his icon, so he's on the line if you have a question. Roll call, please.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Stedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Number 6, motion to adopt a resolution approving the collective bargaining agreement between Luzerne County and the Luzerne County Detectives Association. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Kendra.
Ms. Radel, do we have a second?
Second, Perry.
Mr. Perry? On the question?
On the question, Mr. McGinley?
Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
If there's somebody from the administration, possibly maybe Mr. Parsnick could explain to me and members of council, what does the article that deals with the longevity, it's not really clear as to what that is saying regarding people getting longevity pay for an hourly rate of pay. If somebody could take a look at that and try and explain that to me on an example of a detective who makes a $100,000 base salary and has 32 years of experience. Could you please explain to me that provision in that part of the contract?
Mr. Parsnick?
Can you hear me, Chair McGinley?
Yes, you can. Did you hear Mr. Griffith's question?
Yes, I can hear him.
What he posed was someone with a salary of $100,000 that has a 32-year career with the county. What would that translate to as far as longevity?
I don't have the exact figure in front of me. We do that in the beginning of every year to put it into the longevity payments. It's figured, the detective's longevity is figured into their salary, which goes into their retirement. It's not a flat payout like for the other detectives that are hired after a certain date. So in order to me to give you a correct figure, I would have to pull that from our files.
So Mr. Parsnick, if so we don't give them a longevity check like we give everybody every year?
Only the detectives, Mr. Griffin, that are hired after January 1 of 2012.
So this longevity payment goes towards them when they retire, is that correct?
That's built into their salary, yes, and it goes into retirement.
Okay, so if we have a person who's working for $100,000 a year, he's worked there 32 years, you take 32 divide by 2 because it's at 0.5%, that's 16 years of service at $100,000 salary. That means he walks out the door with $16,000, is that correct?
Without having the exact figure in front of me, I can't say that that's correct, but that's part of the formula, yes.
Okay. All right. So then how does that figure into section B, where it says straight time, overtime, double time will include the base salary plus the longevity rate added? How does that affect their time when we're doing it as a base salary and you're computing their overtime, and that's an hourly rate? So how does that work in? Can you explain that?
The hourly rates that are in there are included in the base salary, and their straight time and overtime for that year gets built into their salary. And then the longevity rate gets added on top of that.
Okay, but my question is, so if we have a detective who works 42 hours, that means he has 2 hours overtime. And that's a time and a half, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we have a 2 hours of overtime, what is the hourly rate for that 2 hours overtime? How's that computed if we're going to add longevity to that?
It's included with their base salary. So whatever their base salary is that year, plus whatever they get, the longevity formula gets added to that.
Okay.
Because it's part of their retirement.
But I mean, at the time when they get the overtime, it's part of their paycheck, correct? The 2 hours overtime,
yes.
That would be part of their paycheck.
Yes,
right.
that is correct.
So it's kind of convoluted in that section. So it's kind of hard to understand. So I'm hoping, I appreciate the effort to try and clarify. The other section of the contract that I have issues with is the one where we're going to pay life insurance to the detectives for as long as they live. It's obviously a concern that we just recently looked at for the LCTA, and we have it in their contract that we pay their $50,000 worth of life insurance as long as they're alive. That's a pretty lucrative benefit considering they don't work at the county anymore. The other concerns, I mean, I have a lot of concerns with this contract. I'm going to probably at some point, hopefully motion to table this at the moment, but I want to get some more clarity. In Article 7, which deals with clothing and equipment allowance, this is basically just a bonus for the detectives. I mean, they're basically getting a $2,200 bonus, so why don't we just label it that and stop the games and say it's clothing and equipment allowance when in fact it's not? Because we don't ask them to give us a receipt for any of their clothing or equipment, correct? There's no documentation that says they used it for any of that, correct?
That's correct.
So we're basically giving them a $2,200 bonus. So we should just put it in the contract that all detectives get a $2,200 bonus, and be at least transparent with the people of the county to let them know what exactly he's getting or they're getting. So I have some concerns with that language as well in the contract. We have and the last question, I think it's the last question, is the sick leave issue. In the sick leave issue, if we have a detective who voluntarily retires today through August 31st, up to 60 days at the current rate of pay, some of the detectives who are eligible for that benefit are making $60 an hour. So if you do the math on that, that's like a $24,000 check they're going to walk out the door with if they retire today. Yeah, and I understand if they're getting $100 and some thousand on the front end, when you're buying them out for $60,000 or $24,000, yeah, maybe that might not be such a bad deal. However, the problem that I have, that's $24,000 of money for one detective. We have 6 detectives that are eligible to retire. If they wanted to take that benefit, I believe there's 6 that qualify for that. If we round that out to say an average person's going to get $25,000 each, that's $125,000. Is that money budgeted in a 2021 budget somewhere that I didn't see?
If 6 detectives decided to retire, that would have to come out of the district attorney's budget. She would have to find those funds.
And find those funds. There's nothing in the budget that shows that money. Then, correct?
She would find it in her funds.
Okay, but if there's no money budgeted in her budget, where would she find those funds? Because she didn't budget it, right?
I think that would be a question for the district attorney to respond.
Well, I mean, is there
responsible
money
for a budget?
But my question is, if we're going to approve a contract that allows us to pay this money out August 31st of 2021, and there's no money budgeted for that.
Well, I think, Mr. Griffith, if you looked at that, it said someone who indicates they will definitely be retiring by the end of the year on August 31st. So you're looking at the end of year payment situation for that particular benefit.
No, I understand exactly what it's saying. My question is that it's money that's not budgeted. Where would that money come from? Or would we have to provide a budget amendment to transfer money for that? Because there's obviously, I think her budget's probably pretty lean.
That would be up to council to make an amendment, but I don't think people would be looking at that. The other thing you have to remember, Mr. Griffith, I think is this is a contract or an arbitration award that's been in effect for many, many years. Some of the provisions of the contract or award are, long time amendments have been there in place. I think the management has done a good job about paring down many of those amendments, and also considerable change in the salary structure, particularly with new hires. And as you all know from collective bargaining experience, that's where the changes are made. It's very, very difficult, particularly with a group that has arbitration as an option, to change the contract without directly affecting everyone. So the major changes that have been affected have been with the new hires, and I think they've done a good job in reining in a lot of those particular items that you addressed through that.
And I agree that, there's been some strides made as we move forward to try and trim back the eligibility for these big buyouts and big payouts, and I appreciate what the administration has done so far. My concerns are there's some things in this contract that are not something that I can support, especially on the sick leave option. We're giving them the option to take sick leave, which is a benefit. I work for companies that don't give you that benefit. It is a benefit if you're to pay you. That's a great thing. It shouldn't be a cash cow, and that's the problem I have. And I understand it's in the contract. I think if you want to make it a $50 a day buyout at 60 days, that's reasonable, I guess, if you're going to give them a buyout. But for them to take their hourly salary and apply it to all the time that they have accumulated for sick leave, and then take a big, huge check at the end of the day, I don't think it's fair to the people of the county to do that. And I would never even think about supporting this contract with that kind of language in there. So those are my concerns with the contract.
Mr. McGinley, can I speak, please?
Sure.
So, Mr. Griffin, the last contract went to arbitration, as you know. Is it arbitrator's award, the last contract? I reviewed this contract with the district attorney and the assistant district attorney, and they agreed with our final proposal. It was all discussed, so there are no surprises for the district attorney. She is in approval for this contract, and I will leave it at that.
Okay, well, thank you. Other members of the council?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Parstek, looking at this contract, it is sometimes alarming, and Walter, you brought everything out, and all of us will agree with you that some of the things in this contract are pretty outstanding. We all wish we had something like this, but the bottom line is, what choices do we have? Mr. Parstek, if we vote no to this, where do we go to?
We would go back to the bargaining table. We would discuss what the issues are with the Detectives Association. They can either go back and continue to bargain further or decide to file for arbitration, as they might tell me we reached an impasse.
And dealings with arbitration, how have we fared out through the years?
There have been some arbitrations where we were fine with. There are some where we didn't fare as well as we thought. I'd like to point out that this last award went to arbitration, and this is the award that was given on the last contract, and it's extremely similar to this contract. I don't really know at this point how successful we would be in getting any different terms through an arbitrator at this point.
That's the dilemma we're in. you're stuck with what you have, or it goes to arbitration to try to do something about it, and we end up paying more.
Mr. McGinley. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm finished.
Okay, who's trying to speak?
This is Vito.
Okay, Mr. Joel.
I mean, just to give a follow-up with a little bit with Mr. Perry's question. Since I've been involved with the county, even prior to home rule coming in, a great majority of our contracts were those that were subject to interest arbitration, like the detectives, were generally allowed to go to the interest arbitration. And in my opinion, someone who has negotiated union contracts over many years, we did not fare as well as we would have had we agreed to something prior to going through the interest arbitration. We lose a tremendous amount of discretion and ability to in negotiation when we go through interest arbitration. It takes a lot of fortitude, really, for a government entity like county council in this case to approve a contract. Especially, I totally understand all the comments that were made about many of the different provisions in the contract that many would look to and say are overly generous. The reality is that once many of those provisions are in there, most of which were put in there through interest arbitration awards, it's very difficult to get them out. And I think that the county administration in this case has really done a great job. I haven't had any involvement with this specific contract, but they've done a great job over the last number of contracts with attempting to tier benefits in a way that new hires the benefits would be less generous for new hires and salary would be less generous for new hires. The fact is, right now, this proposal is a known quantity for Luzerne County government, and if we go to interest arbitration, that will not be the case. I know many governments over the years would prefer to just have an arbitrator make the award, and that really is perilous. And we've actually had some very, very one-sided, painful awards over the years that I know while I was chief solicitor we had to deal with. So it's not a choice between taking this and going back to the table and getting something better. I really think it's a choice between taking this, where you know what the outcome is fiscally, and then rolling the dice and going to the table and going through interest arbitration. So I don't think under home rule, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've had one where council has actually approved a negotiated settlement of a collective bargaining agreement. And I believe this would be a first, and I think this would be a positive, heading in a positive direction, especially because it's a known quantity.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Vito, it's Sheila. I just want to know, do they share the cost of arbitration, or how does the cost of arbitration work?
I mean, the cost of arbitration would be split. We have an arbitrator that we appoint. The union has one that they appoint, and then there's a third that is agreed upon between the parties. But the real cost, when I'm assessing the cost of having this known quantity of knowing that we have a philosophy that we're following contract to contract, to be able to get benefits in line, be able to get salary in line, and not have to worry about some out of left field a decision from an arbitrator. That the real cost, I think, is in the unknown of what you could end up with at the end of the day. I would tell you that my experience has been it will not be better than what we're dealing with here now. And I don't mean that specifically with in terms of this detective's contract, but what I mean is I don't think it gets better when we go back to the table with interest arbitration, and that's the real cost. I mean, we are going to have costs. We have attorney's fees, and we end up splitting the cost for the third arbitrator as well. But I think the real cost is in that unknown, and the fact that you lose control over the direction that you want to take as an administration. And I'm really impressed as somebody who's negotiated these with the direction that the administration has taken, especially when it comes to the tiering, when it comes to the serious reduction in salaries for new hires. Those are very, very difficult hurdles to get over. And I know many of you have been involved with unions over the years and know how difficult that is. So it's not just the cost of the attorneys.
Definitely.
Other members of council?
Mr. McGinley, if nobody else has anything else?
Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
And I certainly respect what Mr. DeLuca just said. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think he does either. And we can look at past practice and we can look at all those things. This is the first go around on this. I don't see any reason why we cannot ask, as members of the council who represent the people of this county, to have the administration go back to the bargaining table with these people and see what they can do to do what they have to do to try and lower this. Some of these egregious items like life insurance as long as they live. That's not something that we can't. That's a deal breaker here. It's just these are items that could possibly be negotiated away with a second go around. We're not at arbitration area yet. This is only the first time they submitted the contract. They haven't gone to interest arbitration. The last time they went to interest arbitration, it was less than what they were proposing, if I remember correctly. I think they had a 1.5% or 2.5% in their contract, and the arbitrator came back and made it 1%. Is that correct? Mr. Parsnick, do you remember?
I don't remember the last arbitration, but I know that the arbitrator awarded them a higher salary than what we proposed.
On the last arbitration award?
Before we went to an impasse, yes.
Okay. And that's, I mean, some of these things are really not, we're not addressing it long term, and I understand what Mr. DeLuca said, but we're not addressing some of these issues long term. We're going to have to address these each and every contract every 4 years with this life insurance issue and the ability to take a huge buyout for your sick time and all of those things. There's no clauses in this contract that says any new hires can't get that stuff. There's none of that stuff in there. So, if we want to weed out the people who have already been there and have spent their time in the office and got their 30-some years in, and the whole point is the incentive to get them to retire so we have less salaries, I get it. But we're not addressing the long-term problem here of saying that these other perks have to go away as well. Yes, I agree. They're contributing more to their health care. I applaud the contract negotiator for that. I applaud the fact that last time we had a contract, it was 120 days of sick days that they could take a buyout if they wanted. This time it's only 60 and 40. So kudos to the administration for doing the work and trying to knock that stuff down. I just think there's other things in this contract that should be looked at and possibly, say, hey, you know what, if you're willing to give this up, you might get the vote for this. But I don't think we should just roll over on the fact that, well, if we go to arbitration, we may end up paying more money because we haven't gotten to that point yet. So I think we need to do our due diligence and see if we can get them to get more from the union than we can. If it doesn't hurt to ask, and if we get nothing else, then we don't get anything else.
Mr. McGinley, if I could respond to that, because there's are very serious legal consequences in many cases when you're negotiating a union contract, you're negotiating a union contract in good faith. The administration has, the premise, I think, of Mr. Griffith's argument is that the administration has not gone down every alleyway and made every attempt to try to get the best possible deal for the county. And, we have, 13 unions, Mr. Parsnick? Is it 13?
We have 13
How many are subject to interest arbitration?
Almost half.
We have 0 times under home rule that I'm aware of where county council has agreed to a collective bargaining agreement without going to interest arbitration for those unions. If we establish a practice where the administration has agreed to a tentative agreement, they are recommending something that they view as being in the best interest of the county, and it comes to council, and council says, hey, let's take a shot at maybe trying to squeeze this out of them, we're not going to get their best deal when we're at the table with them initially. So I get it. Everyone has to vote their conscience on this, but I don't want anyone to be under any misconception here. This is not part of the negotiation process here now. This is a tentative agreement that was that the union, my understanding, has already approved, that the administration in good faith has brought before council, and here's what we have at this point. I don't believe it's a good practice for council to believe that part of the process should be picking apart different parts of this tentative agreement and going back and taking another shot at it. I think we run the risk of having an unfair labor practice filed.
Well, I don't understand why we're even voting for it then. If we vote no, what happens?
Well, let's get to the vote then.
What's the point? What's the point of council voting on it? I don't understand.
The point is whether it's going to be up or down, approved or disapproved.
Okay.
That's why we're voting. We have a motion for Ms. Radel, second by Mr. Perry. Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Ms. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee? Mr. Urban?
No.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
No.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
9 yes, 2 no.
Thank you. Moving down to number 7. Motion to adopt a resolution into a lease agreement for a portion of land at the Luzerne County Annex for the use by the flower tent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
So
Kendra.
moved.
So moved.
Second.
Who's that? Ms. Segman, was that you?
I second, I think Kendra made the motion.
Okay, Kendra made the motion, Ms. Segman made the second. On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Thank you.
Unanimous.
Number 8 and 9 have been removed from the agenda. Moving down to number 10. Motion to adopt Ordinance amending the administrative code at section 2.10, Luzerne County Authority Boards and Commissions. This would be to adopt. So this would be the second reading and the final vote. We have a motion.
So moved, Walter.
Mr. Griffith, do we have a second?
Second, Linda.
Who's that? Ms.
Linda.
Howard? Very good. On the question?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Perry.
I certainly agree with the premise of this ordinance, but I do have a problem with the actual charter itself. I would like to have Mr. DeLuca explain what your concerns are, what our concerns are, if we approve this ordinance, which is a lot. And before you answer, Mr. Luca, I just want everybody to know that as chairman of the ABC committee, this is one of the questions I ask. So, I asked the candidates if indeed they would not receive any type of compensation, pension, benefits, etc. But it's a question I ask. It's a question. It's not an ordinance. It's not a law. Mr. DeLuca, can you expound, please?
Well, I know I mentioned this 2 weeks ago when this came up. I also understand where Mr. Griffith is coming from, and of course, council had expectations that there was that no board members were receiving compensation, and I totally understand that, and I think council has every right to expect that if they are appointing people who say they're not taking compensation, that they will not. The problem in this case, though, I think, is the language that Mr. Griffith is proposing is actually identical to what's in the charter at what is it, 803, I believe it is, F, except he removes the first phrase, which is unless otherwise provided for an applicable law. So the charter, which is where we all get our authority to act, and certainly where council gets its authority to act, provides that that no member shall receive compensation unless otherwise provided for in applicable law. I think actually another important provision in the charter is under 903, where it talks about the accountability and ethics code, and at the end of that section, section 903 talks about which benefits, that the accountability, conduct, and ethics code applies to everyone, and in authorities, boards, commissions. At the end, the last sentence of that paragraph says, this section of the charter shall not be construed to prohibit employees of the county, members and employees of a county board, county authorities, boards, and commissions, and others from accepting group discounts, group insurance, or other economic advantages offered to all these individuals. So specifically in the charter, under the Article 9, which mentions accountability, conduct, and ethics, it actually specifically mentions group insurance under that provision. So although I understand what the intention is, I think Ms. Hauk and I know Mr. Perry as well, you had mentioned that your committee is looking at inquiries into the authorities, boards, and commissions, and whether or not there are any more of these types of benefits being offered to any board members. I know as well that you had talked about a questionnaire and asking prospective members to commit to not receive any such benefits. this ordinance, though, unfortunately, I don't believe that this ordinance would be in compliance with the charter, and I honestly don't believe it would even be enforceable. So, as far as, I don't believe it would have any legal effect.
Other members of council?
Mr. McGinley, if nobody's going to speak, I will.
Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
The question that I have is Mr. DeLuca just cited the section of the accountability and ethics code section of the charter that deals with employees of the county. And it does state members of authorities, members and employees of county authorities. I guess we could construe that to say board members, but it says members and employees of county authorities. Boards and commissions can take life insurance or group insurance. I mean, they're talking about employees, prohibit employees of the county. So, the Office of Law could be masters of the English language as much as they want. My opinion is that was the explicit intent of this charter, and the explicit intent of the ethics code is that we did not want people to do that. And I understand Mr. DeLuca's point that we don't have a legal authority to tell an authority on their basis of their law that they can't provide that to their employees or to their board members. We don't have that. The Authorities Act says they can. My point is we as a county have the ability to tell them, if you're going to get appointed to this board, this is what we're telling you, that you cannot take it. Doesn't mean if it's offered to you, you can say, I'll take it. That's fine. We have no recourse to that. But we're telling you as a county that we are telling you we don't want you to take it. That's the point of the administrative code change. Not now and not while you retire from that board either. Now, if the board wants to pay that to them, then I guess we don't have a lot of recourses, as Mr. DeLuca said. But I think as a county, we need to be as clear as we need to be with every board member that when they go in to apply for a board authority or commission, that these are the guidelines that we as a county are imposing. Now, if they want to take the benefit, then they're going to have to answer for that, obviously. But we have made it very clear that they're not supposed to take it, and we've made it very clear that even when they're not there, they're not supposed to take it. That's the point of the administrative code. And I understand, we as a county are not governed by the Authorities Act. We are governed by the charter. And so if the Authorities Act wants to give it to them, and they're on the board, and they take it, I guess there's not a whole lot we can do about that other than shine the light of daylight on that whole problem. But I just think we need to be perfectly clear in our charter and our administrative code and our ethics and all the stuff that we have in our ethics code that says they're not supposed to get it. I think we need to make sure that, and if in fact the issue is that we can't do that, then I guess we really don't have the right to ask them that question either. Because if we deny somebody a placement on the board because they say, yeah, well, you know what, I won't, I'm going to take it if it's offered to me. Do we deny them the placement on the board then, legally?
Yes.
Yeah. We can.
Yeah, you can. Are you actually disputing the language in the charter under 903 that says that this section of the charter shall not be construed to prohibit members of county authorities, boards, and commissions from accepting group insurance? You don't believe that members applies to appointed board members?
No, I don't think that. I think. Well, what about the boards? So can members of the board get compensated too?
Wait, members of what board?
Any board.
Well, it says specifically members of county authorities, boards, and commissions.
Right. They can.
Yeah, under the charter.
Okay. So if we appoint somebody to the, let me think of a board, the airport board, and they want to give them a compensation, they can take it.
Well, as long as it's legal under the, don't forget, the Municipal Authorities Act provides that the only one who could set a salary for a municipal authority would be the creating body, which in this case would be Luzerne County. So,
but you're saying that section,
Mr. McGinley, it's Linda. I would like to withdraw my second.
Withdraw your second?
Yes.
Very good. Do we have anybody else who would like to second Mr. Griffith's motion?
I'll second it, Mr. Chair. Harry.
Mr. Haas, you have a second. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So my discussion with Mr. DeLuca is that section of the charter shall not be construed to prohibit employees of county, members and employees of county authorities, boards and commissions of their offices and employees of judiciary from accepting group discount. So if members of the airport board get life insurance, they can take that.
Okay, first of all, there are a number of different constructs here. There's the Pennsylvania Ethics Act that requires that certain responsibilities on the part of an elected or appointed official. If you're asking me specifically under the charter, is it prohibited by the charter? No, it's not.
Okay.
If all the other requirements are fulfilled, then it's not prohibited by the charter.
Okay, so just so we're clear, anybody on any board, authority, or commission can get any kind of compensation as long as they're not in violation of the state ethics law or any other law. That's exactly what you're telling me the charter says here, correct?
No, that's not. Don't put words in my mouth, Mr.
Okay.
Griffith. What I'm saying
tell me
is
what you're saying.
the language of the charter. I just read it a number of times, and I paraphrased. The section of the charter that talks about it being a violation of the Accountability, Conduct, and Ethics Code to accept benefits from by virtue of their appointment shall not be construed to prohibit members of county authorities, boards, and commissions from accepting group discounts, group insurance, or other economic advantages offered to all these individuals. Now, that means maybe they don't violate this section of the charter, but could it be a violation of the Ethics Act? Absolutely. And I'll give you an example. The LCTA back in 2004 had requested an opinion from the Pennsylvania Ethics Commission as to whether or not board members were permitted to have mileage reimbursement. And the opinion of the Ethics Commission was, no, you cannot have mileage reimbursement. So, if the LCTA approved mileage reimbursement, but it was a violation of the Ethics Act, then it may not be a violation specifically of this section of the charter, but it is a violation of the Ethics Act. So I was just reading you the language of the charter that says...
But the violation of the Ethics Act is because the Authorities Act says they can't take it without authority from the municipal body, correct? That's why it's a violation.
Well, no, not in that case it wasn't. In the Municipal Authorities Act only provides for salaries.
And benefits, it says in there, but in any case, healthcare benefits is a group insurance, so they can get boards and authorities can offer group insurance. That probably would have to be checked with the healthcare. So if somebody
get healthcare,
it's group insurance, right?
No, they specifically cannot get healthcare under the Municipal Authorities Act. They could get.
No, I'm talking about a board.
Yeah, a board members cannot get health insurance under the Municipal Authorities Act. It's specifically stated in the act. You cannot.
Are boards governed under the Municipality Authority Act?
Only municipal boards would be governed.
Municipal Authority Board.
Okay.
Mr. DeLuca, Sheila.
Yeah.
Are we, I mean, aside from everything else that you're saying, aren't we somewhat barred from bringing this up at this point to the Transportation Authority? And you know, it's been a long time that they've been doing it. I don't know. I don't think anything else has been brought to our attention in terms of other boards. You're talking about the enforceability. Chris, I think, Walter, you've been at the meetings. I think it's very clear that what Mr. Perry is saying. And you don't think that is strong enough? If the other part is unenforceable, if we would do anything more and it's unenforceable, then what's the point?
No, I understand, and I appreciate the fact that Mr. Perry is asking that question, and I said at the last meeting I applaud him for that because I think that's a step in the right direction to at least let the applicants know that we're strongly not in favor of that, and I appreciate what he's doing at that meeting. I will say that I agree with that. I think that that's probably about the best we can do at this point. I mean, clearly, I mean, according to the Office of Law, there's not much else we can do.
Okay.
And if we found out anything more, then we can revisit it, maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Mr. McGinley, I have a legal question for the solicitor.
Go ahead.
Quick question, Vito. Could we create some type of document or agreement that maybe potential ABC candidates could sign prior to us appointing them, attesting that they will not take a benefit, which is well within our legal right at that point, prior to appointing them or considering them as an appointment?
You can, I guess, to be honest with you, I don't know to what extent that would be enforceable. I mean, there's a reason, a legitimate reason why municipal authorities have a certain degree of autonomy from the appointing body, and that is to sort of ensure that there will be continuity of operations when you have turnovers in majority, minority of the actual creating body. Could that support a petition to have a specific board member removed if they did not comply with that agreement? It may. I've never seen any cases on that. Because to have the board member reviewed or removed, you'd have to file a petition with the Common Pleas Court. The person has to have notice and an opportunity to be heard. I think certainly what Mr. Perry and Ms. Houck had proposed and talked about very soon after this happened, I do believe that certainly is a step in the right direction. And the other part of this is, even under the Ethics Act, the amount of that these individuals were receiving as far as a benefit goes didn't even rise to the level of something that was required to be reported on ethics forms. So I don't know exactly what the number was, but when I originally looked into that issue, it was just about nominal, maybe slightly above nominal, and it was not something that even required reporting on ethics forms. So, and it is something that it appeared was a practice for many years, not just at LCTA, but at a number of other transportation authorities. Specifically, I believe Lackawanna, because Lackawanna may have actually requested an ethics opinion back in the early 2000s about this same issue. But in answer to your question, sure, you could ask them to agree. I don't know to what extent you'd be able to enforce it.
Or if we make it, can you make it part of their oath of office or anything like that? So, I mean, understandably, like the charter, we have a charter form of government. We all know that there are deficiencies within the charter, and understandably, certain practices have been done for a long time. That's the way it's always been done. It's obviously been found out. We know about it now. We would like to take corrective action, but also be within the legal realm to make it legal as best as we can. But quite honestly, I understand, state statute does trump the charter in certain cases. And this is where my colleagues, I think, need to realize that there are deficiencies. We've lived with the charter for 10 years and things need to be changed. And certain votes need to occur to allow the public to make those changes. So we're not put in this situation of conflict all the time, and these legal conundrums that we have, because there are other areas that we're obviously going to face, very soon, obviously, based on what I've been reading in the newspaper. So, these are things that we discuss for hours, but they could be simply fixed by putting it up for a vote to the public to take some of the language out of the charter that just doesn't make legal sense from a state code perspective. That we know we can't trample on certain rights of other bodies of government, once they're pretty much appointed to an authority. mean, they do follow under the Municipal Authorities Act under Title 53. So I think we as a council need to start doing our diligence and coming forward with some solutions to put those votes out to the public. It's the right thing to do. Then we won't have to continuously talk about it for hours on end, because we need to fix some of the language in the charter. It would make the Office of Law's job a lot easier, and it would make council's job a lot easier. And I think going forward, we need to address those issues.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Okay, we have a motion to amend the administrative code at section 2.10, Luzerne County Authority Boards and Commissions. Mr. Griffith made the motion. Mr. Haas made the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
No.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
No.
Ms. McDermott?
No.
Mr. Perry?
No.
Ms. Radel?
No.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
No.
4 yes, 7 no.
Thank you. Moving down to number 11, motion to adopt a resolution declaring a vacancy in Luzerne County Board of Elections. And this is the resignation from Ms. Tate. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Walter.
Mr. Griffith, do we have a second?
Second, Linda.
Ms. Howe? Another question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Number 12, motion to adopt a resolution declaring a vacancy in the Luzerne County Board of Elections. Mr. Ouellette's resignation. Do we have a motion?
So moved,
Walter.
Linda.
Second, Walter.
Okay, Ms. Hawk made the motion, and Mr. Griffith made the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee? Mr. Schnee? Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes, with regret.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes, I would like to note that we should be thanking Ms. Tate and Mr. Ouellette for their services. They act as a volunteer, and that's a very strenuous and stressful position there, and I appreciate all their efforts and their time that they made to work with our elections office. Moving down to 13.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Snee.
I'd also echo those statements.
Okay.
Talking to Mr. Gould, I ran into him on one of the streets in Hazleton. He told me just on the election that they had between 65 and over 70 some hours of just volunteering their time during that period of time. And as Mrs. Hauk stated last meeting, the whole board did a yeoman's effort, and the people that worked there. And I just want to thank them and thank Mr. Ouellette. I only know Mr. Ouellette a short period of time. He came to county council with a group that he had for better government and clean government. I think Mr. Ouellette is a very honest man, and whatever he did was honestly and came from the heart. and along with Miss Tate. And I'd just like to thank all those board members and workers for all the work they did. And again, as Ms. Hawk said, for a yeoman's effort. And I'd just like to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Real quickly, I totally agree with Robert and yourself. Great comments. They're two good people. I couldn't agree more what you said.
Thank you. Moving down to 13. We're going to have open up nominations for some boards and commissions. We have a motion to open nominations.
So moved, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott, do we have a second?
Second, Linda.
Ms. Houck, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition, any abstentions? Motion carries. Our first one is the Luzerne County Accountability, Conduct, and Ethics Commission. We're currently in need of a Democratic and a Republican member.
I'd like to nominate Diane Dreyer, Linda Hauk.
Okay,
I'll second that, Walter.
so that's Ms. Houck and Mr. Griffith
I'd like to nominate Thomas Mosca.
for the Republican nomination.
Republican.
Yes, for the Republican.
Okay, do we have a
I'll
second?
second that.
Who said that, Ms. Sigmund?
Yes.
Okay,
Motion to close nominations, Mr. Chair.
okay, motion by Mr. Perry, close nominations. Do we have a second?
Second, Urban.
Harry.
Mr. Urban, to close nominations. All in favor of closing nominations indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition, any abstentions, none heard, motion carries. So we would like to appoint by resolution a Democratic member of the Accountability and Conduct and Ethics Board, Ms. Diane Dwyer. We have a motion to appoint by resolution.
So moved, Linda.
Ms. Houck, do we have a second for Ms. Houck?
Second, Kendra.
Ms. Radel? Roll call?
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes?
Ms. Radel,
Yes.
Ms. Seven,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Mr. Griffith,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes. Thank you.
Unanimous.
We have a motion to appoint Attorney Moscow as the Republican member of the Luzerne County Accountability, Conduct, and Ethics Board by resolution.
Kendra.
Ms. Radel?
Second.
Second was
Ms. Seidman.
Ms. Saban. Roll call, please.
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes?
Ms. Radel,
Yes.
Ms. Seven,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Mr. Griffith,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Moving down to the next item, Luzerne, Wyoming County Drug and Alcohol Executive Commission. Do we have a motion to open nominations?
So moved, Linda.
Ms. Howe, second.
Second, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition, any abstentions? None heard. Nominations are open.
I'd like to nominate
Sheila, I
Eugene
move.
Wallace. Linda.
Linda, nominate
Eugene Wallace.
Mr. Wallace. Do we have a second for Ms. Houck for Mr. Wallace?
I'll second that, Walter.
Mr. Griffith, do we have any other nominations?
Yes, Sheila,
Go ahead.
I
Ms.
nominate, who is it? Oh, John McCarthy. I nominate John McCarthy.
Mr. McCarthy, and that is Ms. Saban. Do we have a second for Ms. Saban?
Second.
Second, Schnee.
Okay.
Motion to close nominations, Mr. Chair.
And who's that, Mr. Haas?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. McGinley, it's Linda. I want to withdraw that nomination because I
Right.
just saw that the one opening is for business or industry.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, Ms.
so,
House draws that, so do we have a
right.
motion for Mr. Wallace?
Well, no, that was the motion to withdraw.
I
The
understand.
nomination to
But
withdraw.
is there somebody else who's going to make that motion?
No, there's only one person for business or industry on this list.
Right. You made a motion.
I withdrew it.
That's fine.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Griffith, are you withdrawing a second?
Yes.
Anybody else make any other motions?
Now,
We have
motion to close, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Haas.
Harry.
Close. And do we have a second for Mr. Haas to close the
Second, Urban.
nomination?
Second, Urban.
Mr. Urban. All in favor of closing nominations indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Do we have a resolution to appoint Ms. McCarthy by resolution to the Luzerne, Wyoming County's Drug and Alcohol Executive Commission?
Presented, Schnee.
Mr. Sneed, do we have a second for Mr. Sneed?
Second, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott. Roll call, please.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Carey?
Yes.
Ms. Radel?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
House?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Moving down to letter C, Luzerne County Zoning Hearing Board. Do we have a motion to open nominations?
So moved, Linda.
Ms. Hauk, do we have a second for Ms. Hauk?
Second,
Second, Sheila.
Second, Ms. McDermott. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition, any abstentions? None heard, motion carries. Do we have a nomination?
Mr. McGinley, could I ask a question quick before we do the nomination?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is there any provision in our charter or anywhere that says somebody can only serve a certain period of time on a board or authority or commission?
No.
No, I think, Mr. Griffith, we talked about that in the code review, I believe. And to my knowledge, and Ms. Hauk, since you're the
There
chair
is
of
no
this group-
provision. The
Okay.
commissioners had a 12-year limit that they put in right before home rule started.
Well,
But there's no provision in the current administrative code or anything.
No,
Or the chart.
the reason that I raised the concern is because when we appointed Mr. Dussinger to the Flood Authority, I think that Mr. McGinley made a statement that said that he had, because the other gentleman, I forget, who was on the board was on there too long, and I was just wondering if we had provisions for that.
Oh, if you remember that discussion, Mr. Griffith, going back to the code review, that was my stance when we got to that on the code review, that I felt the 2 terms on the authorities or the Luzerne County Community College should be the maximum. That was my personal thought.
Right, yeah, and Kevin O'Brien was on the Flood Authority for quite a while, and we
right.
put Mr. Dussinger in, and I thought maybe we might have had that provision based on that comment. I do remember the discussion, so I just wanted to clarify that so I know how to vote for this particular nominee. So, because he's been there for quite some time, right, on the zoning board.
Yes, you're right.
I think he's probably been on there even back in commissioner days. Is that correct or no?
You're right, Walter.
Yeah, he's been there for quite some time. So, all
I
right, thank you very much.
In the commissioner's days, I'll tell you, Walter, if my memory is correct, which 8-10 years ago at this point, he was appointed by the council. There was a gap where he was not on, a very brief gap, maybe months, and then he was reappointed. And that shouldn't have been a reappointment, it was an appointment, because there was a break in his service. And I don't remember the reason why there was a break in the service, but.
Your memory is correct, Mr. McGinley.
Okay.
Yeah,
Actually, he hasn't been on there as long as maybe, appears.
Yeah, I just thought we lost a lot of institutional knowledge on the Flood Authority, but that's yesterday's news, so we'll just move along.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
have open nominations, so do we have a nomination?
Mr. Harris, please.
Mr. Snee? Do we have a second for Mr. Snee?
Second, Leanne.
Second,
Ms. Radel?
Leanne.
Roll call, please.
Move to close
Leanne.
nominations. Close nominations.
Yeah, we have to close the nominations. Excuse me. Who's going to close the nominations?
That was Linda.
So,
Okay.
second,
Do we have a second? Who's that, Ms. Radel?
Sheila.
Okay, Ms. Saban. Nominations are closed. Do we have a motion by resolution to appoint Mr. Harris to the Luzerne County Zoning Hearing Board?
Presented, Schnee.
Mr. Snee. Do we have a second for Mr. Snee for the resolution?
Second, Leanne.
Ms. McDermott. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Radel?
Yes.
Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Going over to public comment.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Rabo speaking.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the municipal authorities, just to expound on what Solicitor DeLuca said, it's on the DCED guide for municipal authorities, page 11, in terms of compensation. That it basically says the same thing he said as far as with it when it comes to compensation of board members, that it would have to be coming from the appointing body of that authority. And it says here also that the creation of officer positions specifically to circumvent the requirement of the Municipal Authorities Act that board member salaries be set by the municipal governing bodies is an abuse of public office and a violation of the Ethics Act. So I think that can put some assurance to the council members that there's no way to, bypass or circumvent the appointing power of the council and the charter in terms of when it comes to compensation and also for any perks. I do agree with Councilman Urban that I think there should be an exploration to look into trying to see if it could be done to incorporate that in the oath for board members and for authorities, boards, and commission members moving forward. To address the work session item, Mr. Chairman and members of council, on the toll bridges, I've been saying, Mr. Chair, as you know, since 2014 about the utilization of the misuse and the misappropriation of gas tax and vehicle registration fee money by the state to giving it to the state police for overtime for municipalities, for overtime to patrol municipalities who choose not to have hire their own state or their own local police, and also to pay down pension debt obligations, I think is an egregious, violation. And also the former Auditor General, I sent you all of members of council and the press as far as what the audit that was done by the former Auditor General. I think that money has to be paid back according to Article 8, Section 11A of the state constitution, that the gas tax and vehicle registration fee money used from the motor license fund shall be paid back at the end of the next fiscal year if it's not used for construction or repair of state roads and bridges. So I think that the council and the other 66 counties should tell PennDOT, or even the counties that are involved with the toll bridges where the PennDOT wants to put toll bridges, like Susquehanna County, should come together and tell the state or PennDOT that they must collect that money from the state police and utilize that money for the roads and bridges, not to set up new toll bridges for that. So, Mr. Chair, I would ask you to contact your fellow counterparts in other counties for that. Thank you.
Other members of the public?
Mr. Chairman, Jason Carr.
Mr. Carr, go ahead.
No, thank you. Mr. Griffith made a lot of good points around the county detective contract. I think it would be a good idea if we could see the old contract to compare and contrast what has been added. I'm sure nothing's been lost, but as a taxpayer, I would like to see what the old contract looked like and what you just voted on today. It would be interesting. If you look at a detective that was employed for 20 years in Luzerne County, according to the benefits for time off, someone employed 20 years as a detective is to receive 30 days of vacation, 10 sick days, 5 personal days, and 12 holidays. So out of a work year of 365 days, essentially they're given 57 days off during a work year. So I don't know what they actually accomplish. And I know that's questioned a lot throughout the county. Mr. Vito DeLuca is correct. Going to arbitration, you do lose control over what awards could possibly burden the county legally. But the solution, which I don't think anyone's talked about, is a very simple solution. You stop hiring detectives. Then you don't have to worry about who you're paying if there are none. And then secondly, I would like to know, Mr. Chairman, as far as you know, does anyone employed by Luzerne County earn overtime for attending any county council meetings, such as the clerk, the county solicitors, or anyone from information technology? Only because we just discovered 2 weeks ago that the city of Wilkes-Barre pays overtime to any employee that attends the meetings. And I was wondering if that same practice is held with Luzerne County.
The only person that I have any information on would be the county clerk to the council. And we have worked that out in her schedule that she's, she's paid a salary and that's what she receives. There's no additional compensation.
Congratulations.
I don't want to speak for the solicitors, but I believe they're all on salary, so there would be no additional compensation. And, the employees that belong to the executive branch, I don't have that information.
Mr. McGinley.
The solicitors do not get any additional compensation for attending any of the council meetings, including all the committee meetings.
Okay.
Mr. McGinley, this is Linda. The position of clerk is actually exempt from overtime as a legislative employee. We explored that years ago.
Yeah, we went through a couple processes on that, but there is no additional compensation.
Fantastic. My last point, I would just like to say, I was also 2 years ago at the LCC meeting where the voting machines were discussed, and I believe the actual final vote was taken inside the courthouse, where it was promised and gone over for at least 45 minutes that the additional monies would be placed back on principal of the loan. So I can attest to what Ms. Hauk has stated, and Walter. Thank you so much.
All right. Any other members of the public, please?
Brian Dwyer, Larksville.
Mr. Dwyer, go ahead.
Brian Schreiner can go first. Thank you.
No, Mr. Dwyer, you go first, please.
All right, very well. I would like to, I will put it this way, concur with Mr. DeLuca's opinion on the contract and Mr. Griffith's position on the contract for the county detectives. It is what it is. It appears that there's not a lot we can do about the current contract, but strides need to be made, in my opinion, as a taxpayer, throughout all the union bargaining agreements to start tearing down things. I understand that these were things that were put in place a long time ago, some of them probably before I could vote even, but it's got to be addressed. It's got to be taken care of. That's not something that's available in the outside world. I had something else, but I lost my train of thought, so I'll push my time.
Shiner?
Thank you.
Mr. Shiner?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
In our charter, section 209B7 says the council is to approve by an affirmative vote of at least a majority of its current members collective bargaining agreements involving the county, its employees. Yet, Mr. DeLuca says that you as council are not part of the negotiation. I think you are, and I think you should be. How can you vote on something that you have no say in, other than to vote it up, yes or no? And so by voting no, or even by voting yes, you are part of the negotiation. But you should be involved in it during the process, not at the last minute when it's all done and over and bring to you and say, here, vote on it. It's not how it should work. Council should be apprised of the negotiations and what's going on during the process and be involved in it, which enables you to actually vote on it with the knowledge you need. The authorities, boards, and commissions, it was brought to my attention that the Children and Youth Advisory Board is not posting minutes. They haven't posted minutes for all of last year, and so far nothing this year. But what's more upsetting is their policy for their meetings is that anyone wishing to participate in this public meeting can attend virtually by emailing your request no later than 1 week before to the meeting to be added to the Microsoft Teams invite. That's a violation of the Sunshine Law. They cannot require you to request prior admission to a public meeting just because it's a virtual meeting. The link should be put there just like it is for every other authority, board, and commission, and including the council. This needs to be looked into, needs to be stopped. Their minutes need to be put up online, the same as all the other ABCs. Also, I see now the LCTA is doing the same thing. They're just not posting anything. There's no way to be able to attend their meeting that they had today at 5 o'clock. No posting, no agenda, no nothing. So that's a move on the LCTA. So I appreciate if the ABC committee and council itself look into some of these things. Also, I understand that we purchase laptops for all members of council. So nice that you're using them and you're using the cameras so that we can see our elected officials. Teams has the ability to do the gallery view. You could even put yourselves in your own seats in the council room. It's all available within the Teams program. And it should be done. I want to see who's talking. I don't want to hear somebody on the phone who I can't see. I don't know. I don't see their mouse moving. No different than we would in a public meeting where we're actually in attendance. And lastly, I would hope that you postpone your executive session. I think it's pretty arrogant to have an executive session in between these meetings when it's not an emergency. Making the public sit and wait for hour, whatever it might be, to then move on to the work session. You can have your executive session anytime you need. You could have it on Monday, you could have it on Thursday, and you can have it after the meeting tonight. But you don't need to have it in between and make the public sit here. I think it's a very arrogant thing to do, and I hope council moves it to the end of the work session or a different day. Thank you.
Mr. McGinley, could I respond to the allegations made by Mr. Shiner regarding the Children and Youth Advisory Board?
Hold on 1 second, Mr. DeLuca. I want to see if there's other members of the public. Then you certainly can have a chance to respond to some of those. Other members of the public?
Yeah, Mr. Manta.
Go ahead, Mr. Manta.
Yeah, I've been sitting back and listening to all of these comments from all our public officials and all of our people in the county, the few people that speak up at the meetings. And I came to a conclusion that if the county is doing something wrong and they did it wrong for 10 years, it still doesn't make it right. So what I'm trying to get at is, you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, wrong. This is why they elected a county council to adjudicate the problems and to address the problems and correct them. So the meetings are in essence a reiteration of something that has been wrong for the county council, and it's been wrong for the commissioners. So why can't we put something in there, like Mr. Urban said, to change things? We're up to change things. I think this is the 21st century that we need to start changing things now, because I'll tell you, we're really headed down the wrong direction with some of these things that we're addressing. Thank you very much, and I'll listen to my answer.
Any other members of the public? Mr. DeLuca, you have the floor.
Yeah, I have to respond to Mr. Shiner recklessly alleging that this committee of citizens who was put to in their position really to be in an advisory capacity to children and youth, that they're somehow violating the law. They're not. Our office took a look at it. I actually had meetings with the leadership of that board. They've been sort of accused of violating all sorts of municipal laws and Sunshine Acts. They don't. The Sunshine Act does not apply to them. They have absolutely no actual government authority. They truly are there to support the children and youth. And to have Mr. Shiner make such reckless allegations about these people who are there to serve this board and in an advisory capacity, it's really unfortunate. They are not violating any law. They are there doing public service, and the shame of it is that they've spent so much time recently having to deal with these types of allegations about lack of attention to some sort of formalities that doesn't apply to them, that they're not able to do the work that they were appointed there to do. So you could all rest easy. The Children and Youth Advisory Board is not violating any Pennsylvania law. They are not, although they're not required to advertise their meetings, they have been advertising their regular meetings. So I just, that had to be corrected because these people are very concerned. And we had a number of meetings about it this week because they've been accused of these things. So again, rest assured, there's no violations for the Children and Youth Advisory Committee.
And if I may
Would you
add,
put that in writing to me, Mr. DeLuca, please?
I'm not putting anything in
I would like
writing
that
to
put
you,
in
Mr.
writing.
Shiner.
Mr. Shiner,
You're
please.
making reckless allegations about criminal conduct? Really? You are?
Yes.
Come on.
Mr. DeLuca.
No, you come on.
No.
You've got a heck of a lot of nerve there, Mr. DeLuca.
No, Mr. Shiner.
To even say something like that.
Mr. Shiner, please.
I'm sorry. He's just insulted me,
You're going to
Mr.
be muted,
McGinley.
Mr. Shiner.
if I may
Of course
add,
I will.
if I may add something,
Yes, Ms. Copeland,
Mr.
go ahead.
Chair, just for the record, the minutes of the Children and Youth Services Board are posted. It's under the Luzerne County .org Agenda Center, Children and Youth Advisory Board. The most recent minutes of October 14th, 2020 are posted, and the December minutes are not posted because the meeting just took place this week.
Thank you.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Yes.
That concern that Mr. DeLuca just alluded to came from a member of that advisory board. I got the call as well. So the advisory board member is concerned about the fact that has happened. So if there's allegations of that point, then maybe somebody from the advisory board needs to tell a member of their advisory board that they are not in violation of any law, and maybe that person will stop calling members of council as well as members of the public to complain about the issue. More importantly, though, is the LCTA is not following the law, and there's nothing said about that.
Okay.
So I need to know why we are not concerned about the LCTA not following the rules, as well as other boards, authorities, and commissions.
Griffith, nobody said we weren't concerned.
Well, then
I don't know
where
you heard that statement.
Well, I'm not saying we're not. I'm saying is, what is wrong with them opening it to the public in the first place? If they don't have a statutory requirement to do that, that's fine. But they can certainly open it up to the public. What's the problem with that?
I think the office's law is dealing with the situation. Let's see what the result is, please.
But I want an answer from Mr. DeLuca why they can't just open it to the public, even though they're statutorily not required.
Mr. Griffith, my issue at all is not with, if there's a philosophy of that board and they choose to have the meetings advertised or not advertised, certainly that's within their discretion. But to have someone come to a public meeting and recklessly accuse these public servants of violations of law without having all the information, that is a problem. I've had conversations with the specific board member that you're speaking of, and I disavowed him of that in great detail, along with discussions that I had with the board itself.
So should he?
My issue is with the recklessness of coming to a public meeting and accusing this board of doing things that are illegal without having all the information. That's my problem.
And I understand your concern, but quite honestly, if it says they're an advisory board, one would assume, and I know we don't like to use the word assume, one would assume that that person would fall under that act. And I certainly, with that assumption, is based on the fact that the member of the board, a member of that board, was one that called us to tell us that. So we are not, we're voicing an opinion, I am anyway, because the person who said that to me, I would have assumed that that advisory board should have followed sunshine law as well.
Well,
it's incorrect, absolutely, now that you pointed it out, and I appreciate that. But that board member, maybe the board member needs to be disciplined on his end, not disciplining us or telling us that we're out of line by bringing it up. I mean,
we're not out of line at all.
I'm not speaking to you, Mr. McGinley.
Excuse
I'm
me.
speaking to Mr. McGinley. I'm speaking to Mr. DeLuca.
No, we've had.
I am speaking to Mr. DeLuca, and I have the floor.
What?
I have the floor. You gave me the floor.
You can be taken off the floor, Mr. Griffith.
No, I cannot. No, I cannot.
Yes, you can.
Mr. DeLuca, I appreciate your input a lot. I really do. And I will leave it at that. I just think that we need to hold everybody accountable. The spirit of home rule was open and transparent government. That was the spirit. And I appreciate if they would open it up to the public. Thank you.
Mr. McGinley, I have a quick question for
Go ahead, Mr. Irvin.
Since I'm a member of the MHDS advisory board itself, I know that is a component of actual a legitimate statute.
Yeah.
So is the Children and Youth Advisory Committee or board, whatever you want to call them, a component of a state statute?
Yes.
Only because I do see other counties, they have the same type of advisory boards throughout the entire Commonwealth. There are, I just looked up York County, for instance. They have their commissioners actually have an entire section of code in their county regarding the advisory board, the membership qualifications and what they are tasked to do and what they are tasked to follow. So is that board a component of some type of statute that may be in existence out there or Pennsylvania code? And if so, then that probably would deem them having the requirement of to act above board and out in the sunshine. So can you look at that, maybe research it?
No, I that's what I'm telling you, Mr. Urban. I did research it ad nauseum.
Okay.
It's under 55 PA Code, Chapter 3130.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with the responsibilities, duties of this advisory committee. It is an advisory committee.
Right.
These are people that have specialties that the Children and Youth Agency could tap to try to get better ideas of how to take care of the youth of our county. This is not a government body that has control over money, that makes any other types of decisions. So this clearly is not something that requires Sunshine Act. I agree with Mr. Griffith. If it's the philosophy of that board that they want more public involvement, then fine. But they're not violating any law.
Okay, so if we passed an ordinance saying that all ABCs must be done in the sunshine of Luzerne County, including them, can that be done?
Sure. And they actually do that, though, Mr. Urban. They actually do advertise their meetings. I think the issue that one of the board members had was that there were some committees of that board that may have met and didn't meet in public. Again, that wasn't a violation of the Sunshine Act either. But sure, if council wants every one of this board's meetings, this committee's meetings to be public, that's absolutely certainly something that council could require.
Okay, so we could adopt some type of ordinance conveying that message to all ABCs that all their business should be public, and then on top of it, allow public comment, because, I mean, understandably, we do appoint those members as a governing body in Luzerne County, so they are to act on our behalf in certain respects, and then, to allow public participation would be something that we all want to be a proponent of, because just they really shouldn't have any secret meetings or anything. Nobody should be holding any secret meetings out, but quite honestly, if we make it a requirement in our county, and maybe through an ordinance or something like that, it'll put the issue to bed.
Okay.
Mr. McGinley, there is something in our bylaws that says they all fall under the Sunshine Act, I believe, somewhere. It's either in our bylaws or it's in the administrative code about authorities, boards, and commissions.
Yeah, we can look that up.
All right, thank you.
No problem with that. We'll look it up and see what how it applies. All right. I need a motion for adjournment, then I'll talk about the executive session. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. Urban, do we have a second?
Second, Kendra.
Ms. Radel, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition, any abstentions? None heard, motion carries. The executive session will only be in regards to litigation, and the only reason we're going to have it this evening because there is a meeting scheduled early next week that the solicitor's office needs to have some information to go to that meeting. We will not discuss anything in regards to personnel because of time, number one, and because of the fact that it could be very lengthy. So I will be sending out an email to council looking for a date to have a separate executive session that would deal with that fact, because then it will allow for more time to get more in depth with that particular situation. So,
Mr. McGinley, could I ask that we do the executive session at the end of the work session, please?
Well, then we have to come back after the work session and have an adjournment.
No, we don't. No, we don't have to do that. No, we don't. We can announce the executive session at our
Mr.
next
Griffin,
meeting.
excuse me. Let me ask the solicitor. Okay? Thank you.
Wait, well, I'm sorry. What was the question?
The request was we have the executive session at the end of the work session.
You could have the executive.
I said, I think we would have to come back and adjourn that work session after the executive session was complete.
You could complete the work session and just say, now we are going into executive session. Meeting's over. And then we would announce why we're going into executive session. And then at the next meeting, we would announce how long we were in executive session.
So the very next council meeting, we would make an announcement regards the executive session. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. If everybody's comfortable with that, I have no problem with that. Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Sounds good. That means it's 8:31. See if we can reconvene with the work session at 8:40. And of course, Manager Pedri, you can get your state of the county presentation ready, please. So that'll be the very first item as we get ready for the work session. So 8:40, please. Ms. Crocomo will move the executive session to the end. So you're.
I'm contacting council now.
Okay. Thank you. 8:40, please.